stagecoach rattled to a halt, dust billowing around the weathered buildings of Cottonwood Springs. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan gathered her medical bag and peered through the grimy window at what remained of the once thriving frontier town. Boarded windows and empty hitching posts told their own story. The driver, a man with leathery skin and knowing eyes, turned to face her. "Miss, you sure this is where you want to be? This town's been dying since the sickness came. Most folks with sense have already left." Elizabeth squared her shoulders. "That's precisely why I'm here, Mr. Davis. Where there's sickness, there's need for a doctor." She noticed a large ranch on the outskirts, its fences still standing proud despite the desolation surrounding it. "Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your comment helps our community grow stronger. Thanks, and let's get back to the story." The driver shook his head as he handed down her trunk of medical supplies. "Your predecessor didn't last 3 months before the consumption took him too. Don't expect gratitude from these folks, especially not from old Blackwood out at the ranch." Elizabeth followed his gaze toward the distant property. "Samuel Blackwood lost his wife and both children to the sickness. Won't let nobody near his place now. Blames the town somehow." Elizabeth absorbed this information silently, watching as a thin figure emerged from what she assumed was the mayor's office. Mayor Collins was a small man with anxious eyes that darted over Elizabeth's traveling clothes and settled uncertainly on her medical bag. "Dr. Morgan? We weren't expecting a woman. The telegram just said a new physician was arriving." Elizabeth had encountered this reaction often enough that it no longer stung. "The University of Pennsylvania accepts female students, Mayor Collins. I assure you my training is thorough." She held out her credentials, which the mayor examined with undisguised surprise. The mayor's demeanor softened slightly. "Well, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. Dr. Harrison's office has been empty since he passed. It's yours now if you want it." The doctor's office was a single-room building with a small attached living space. Dust covered every surface, and the medicine cabinet stood nearly empty. The examination table was draped with a sheet that had yellowed with time. Elizabeth set down her bag and began to take inventory of what little remained. An older woman appeared in the doorway, arms crossed defensively. "So you're the new doctor?" Elizabeth turned, offering a smile. "Elizabeth Morgan. And you are?" "Martha Wilson. I was Dr. Harrison's nurse, before he died like all the rest." Elizabeth gestured to the nearly empty shelves. "What happened to the supplies?" Martha's expression darkened. "Most were used up before Dr. Harrison passed. The rest were taken by folks desperate for anything that might help their sick." The woman's weathered face softened slightly. "You should know what you're facing, doctor. This illness starts with a cough that won't quit. Then fever, weakness. Some recover, most don't." Elizabeth nodded, her mind already cataloging the symptoms. "How many cases currently?" Martha sighed. "About 20 that I know of. Most folks with means have fled. Those remaining are too poor or too sick to leave. There's clean sheets in the back room. I'll come help you get settled in the morning." Elizabeth thanked her, and Martha paused at the door. "One more thing you should know. The Blackwood Ranch has the only reliable water source around. Spring-fed. But since his family died, Samuel won't share it with the town. Some say that's why the sickness spreads. No clean water." Elizabeth spent her first night unpacking and reading through Dr. Harrison's sparse notes. The illness appeared to be a form of pneumonia, but something about the pattern troubled her. By morning, she had cleaned the office and organized her supplies. Martha arrived early, bringing fresh bread and information. "For new cases since yesterday. Johnson family on the East End." Elizabeth grabbed her bag. "Let's start there." The Johnson home was a small cabin with 3 children huddled around their mother's bed. The woman's breathing was labored, her cheeks flushed with fever. The children watched with hollow eyes as Elizabeth examined their mother. The diagnosis was clear: advanced pneumonia with complications. Elizabeth administered what medicines she had, then instructed the oldest child on how to bring down the fever. By midday, Elizabeth had visited 7 homes, each with at least one sick family member. The pattern was becoming clearer. Homes closer to the mine suffered more cases. Homes that used well water showed more severe symptoms than those collecting rainwater. The last home she visited belonged to Thomas Reed, a ranch hand who worked for Samuel Blackwood. He was a large man, now reduced by illness to a shadow in his bed. "I shouldn't be here, ma'am," he wheezed. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't hold with town folk. But I couldn't breathe last night." Elizabeth examined him carefully. How long have you worked at the Blackwood Ranch? Reed coughed violently. 10 years now. Only started feeling poorly when I came to town for supplies last week. Stayed with my sister here. Elizabeth's mind worked rapidly. And at the ranch? Any illness there? Reed shook his head. Not until recently. Mr. Blackwood started coughing 3 days ago. Wouldn't let me call for help. Sent me away when my own cough got bad. Said he wouldn't have another death on his hands. Elizabeth frowned. He's alone and sick out there? Reed nodded weakly. Won't let nobody help him. Not since Mrs. Blackwood and the little ones passed. Elizabeth prepared medicine for Reed and gave instructions to his sister. Then she made her decision. I need to examine the water sources. And I need to see Mr. Blackwood. The mayor protested when Elizabeth announced her intention to visit the Blackwood Ranch. He won't see you. Might even shoot at you just to scare you off. He's done it before. Elizabeth packed her medical bag deliberately. Then he can shoot at me. But I need water samples from his spring, and I need to examine him if he's ill. This sickness has a pattern, Mayor Collins, and I intend to understand it. The mayor sighed heavily. Your funeral, doctor. But take my horse. Faster than walking if you need to leave in a hurry. The ride to the Blackwood Ranch took nearly an hour. The property was large, the main house set back from a well-maintained road. Elizabeth noted the contrast between the town's decay and the ranch's stubborn prosperity. A sign at the gate read, "No trespassing," in bold letters. Elizabeth ignored it and continued toward the house. The door opened before she reached it, revealing a tall figure leaning heavily against the frame. A rifle barrel gleamed in the afternoon light. This is private property. Elizabeth dismounted calmly. Mr. Blackwood, I presume? I'm Dr. Morgan from town. I understand you're unwell. The man's laugh was bitter, interrupted by a harsh cough that he struggled to control. A doctor? Town must be desperate to send a woman. Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. Desperate enough. May I come in? I've treated your man Reed in town. His condition suggests you may be suffering the same illness. Samuel's face was flushed with fever. His breathing labored. I don't need a doctor, especially not one from a town that killed my family. Elizabeth nodded toward the rifle. That would be more convincing if you weren't about to collapse, Mr. Blackwood. As if to prove her point, Samuel swayed slightly, the rifle barrel dipping toward the ground. The standoff lasted another moment before Samuel's strength failed him. He staggered, and Elizabeth moved quickly to catch his arm before he fell. With reluctant acceptance, he allowed her to help him inside. The house was immaculately maintained, as if preserved in time. Photographs of a beautiful woman and 2 young children adorned the mantel. Samuel collapsed into a chair, still clutching the rifle but no longer pointing it at her. How's Reed? The question surprised Elizabeth. She answered honestly as she set down her bag. Quite ill, but I believe he'll recover with proper care. His sister is looking after him. Samuel nodded, then surrendered to another coughing fit. When it passed, he glared at her with watery eyes. You can't save this town, doctor. The sickness is a judgment. Elizabeth ignored his fatalism and began her examination. His lungs were congested, his fever dangerously high. Samuel protested weakly as she unbuttoned his shirt to listen to his chest, but he lacked the strength to stop her. You're in the early stages, but this will progress rapidly without treatment. I need to take water samples from your spring. Samuel's laugh turned into another cough. My water is fine. It's the town's that's poisoned. Their greed poisoned everything. Elizabeth prepared a fever-reducing powder. Perhaps, but I need samples to compare. Scientific method, Mr. Blackwood. Samuel swallowed the medicine with reluctance. Science didn't save my wife. Or my children. Elizabeth met his gaze. No, but it might save you. And others. While Samuel dozed fitfully in his chair, Elizabeth explored the house, looking for clues about the illness pattern. In what had been the children's room, she found a diary belonging to Samuel's wife, Catherine. The entries described the children's illness first, then her own symptoms. The final entry was a plea. Samuel, if you read this, please don't blame yourself. You did everything possible. Elizabeth closed the book gently and returned it to its place. In the kitchen, she found immaculate conditions and a door leading to the spring house. The water there ran clean and clear. When she returned, Samuel was awake, watching her with fever-bright eyes. Found what you were looking for, doctor? Elizabeth set down her bag with collected water samples. Your wife kept detailed notes about the illness. It appears your children became sick first, not her. This contradicts the pattern I'm seeing in town. Samuel's expression tightened with pain. What does it matter now? They're all gone. Elizabeth sat across from him. It matters because understanding the pattern might save others. When did your children first show symptoms? Samuel closed his eyes, the memory visibly painful. After a school celebration in town. 3 days later, the coughing started. Elizabeth's mind worked rapidly. And your wife? Samuel's voice was hollow. A week after the children. She insisted on caring for them herself. I wanted to send for the doctor, but his voice broke. She said they'd be fine. Elizabeth nodded encouragingly. And you never fell ill until now? Samuel shook his head. Never even a cough. Not until 3 days ago. That's why Catherine blamed me. Said I should have been the one to get sick, not them. Elizabeth leaned forward. She blamed you for not getting sick? Samuel's laugh was bitter. Wouldn't you? I watched them die one by one. Couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. The confession seemed to drain the last of Samuel's strength. His fever was worsening despite the medicine. Elizabeth helped him to his bedroom and prepared a stronger dose. You need to rest, Mr. Blackwood. I'll return tomorrow with more medicine. Samuel grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Why bother, doctor? Let this place die. Elizabeth gently removed his hand. Because that's not what Catherine would have wanted. And I think you know it. She left him with instructions for the night and collected her water samples. The ride back to town was somber. Her mind filled with theories about the illness and the man consumed by grief and guilt. The next morning, Elizabeth analyzed the water samples using her microscope and chemical tests. The results confirmed her suspicions. The town's water showed traces of mineral contamination consistent with mine runoff. The well water was worse with visible bacteria. But Samuel's spring water was clean. Martha watched over her shoulder. What does it mean? Elizabeth straightened from her microscope. It means the water is part of the problem, but not all of it. I believe we're dealing with a pneumonia that's worsened by dust and poor water. Those with weakened lungs from working the mine are most susceptible. Martha frowned. Then why did the Blackwood children get sick first? They never went near the mine. Elizabeth showed Martha the notes she'd compiled. Not directly, no. But according to Samuel, they fell ill after a school celebration in town. I need to know more about that event. Martha's eyes widened in recognition. The Founders' Day celebration. They held it at the mine office that year to honor the company. All the children performed songs. It was windy that day, dust everywhere from the tailings. Several children developed coughs afterward. Elizabeth nodded. And the Blackwood children would have been especially susceptible if they weren't regularly exposed to the mine dust. Their lungs wouldn't have developed any resistance. By afternoon, Elizabeth had developed a treatment protocol based on her findings. Clean water, steam inhalation for the lungs, and herbal expectorants to clear congestion. She visited each patient, implementing her approach. The improvement in some was immediately noticeable. As dusk approached, she prepared to return to the Blackwood ranch. The mayor intercepted her. You're going back? After he threatened you? Elizabeth secured her medical bag. He's ill, Mayor. And his spring water might be what saves this town. The mayor sighed. At least take someone with you. Elizabeth shook her head. He won't respond well to a crowd. But I promised to return by morning. The Blackwood house was dark when she arrived. Elizabeth found Samuel delirious with fever in his bed, the medicine untouched on the nightstand. She worked quickly, applying cold compresses and administering stronger medicine. Through the night, she battled the fever, talking to Samuel when his consciousness surfaced. I lost someone too, to illness. My fiancé, David. That's why I became a doctor. In his delirium, Samuel grasped her hand. You couldn't save him either? Elizabeth wiped his brow gently. No, but I've saved others since. That's how we honor them, Samuel. By protecting those we still can. By dawn, Samuel's fever had broken. He woke to find Elizabeth asleep in the chair beside his bed, her medical bag open on the floor. For a moment, he simply watched her, this woman who had ignored his threats and tended him through the night. When Elizabeth stirred, she found Samuel sitting up, his expression unreadable. You stayed. Elizabeth straightened, immediately professional. Your fever was dangerous. Samuel handed her a cup of coffee that he must have prepared while she slept. Why are you really here, doctor? Not just for me. Elizabeth accepted the coffee gratefully. I need your help, Mr. Blackwood. Your spring water is clean. The town's water is contaminated from the mine. Samuel's expression hardened. Not my problem. These people chose profit over safety for years. Elizabeth leaned forward. Your wife didn't blame you for not getting sick, Samuel. She blamed herself for not seeking help sooner. She thought she could handle it alone. I read her diary. Samuel's hands trembled, spilling coffee. You had no right. Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. No, but you have the right to know the truth. And you have the ability to prevent more deaths. Your spring water, properly distributed, could save lives while we implement longer-term solutions. Samuel stood abruptly and walked to the window. Leave the medicine. I'll manage on my own now. Elizabeth gathered her things, frustration evident in her movements. Very well, Mr. Blackwood. But know this: your isolation won't bring them back. It only ensures others will suffer the same fate. At the door, she turned back. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. The ride back to town was tense. Elizabeth reviewing the conversation and wondering if she'd pushed too hard. When she arrived at her office, Martha was waiting with news. The Johnson woman passed in the night. Her children are with the preacher now. Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the loss. Then she straightened. We need to implement water purification immediately. Show me where the town well is located. For the next week, Elizabeth worked tirelessly. She organized teams to boil water, distributed her remaining medicines, and continued research. Cases stabilized, then began to decline slightly. She avoided mentioning Samuel Blackwood, though she often gazed toward his ranch when passing through town. On the 8th day, as she was treating a miner's young daughter, a commotion arose outside. Elizabeth stepped onto the porch to find Samuel Blackwood driving a wagon loaded with water barrels. The townspeople watched in stunned silence as he pulled to a stop in front of her office. Samuel didn't look at the gathering crowd. Instead, he addressed Elizabeth directly. This is from my spring. There's more where it came from. I've opened the access road to the South Spring. Your mayor knows the way. The town can use it until proper solutions are found. Elizabeth approached the wagon, noting the healthy color that had returned to Samuel's face. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. This will make a significant difference. Samuel nodded curtly. It's what Catherine would have wanted. Before he could leave, Elizabeth placed a hand on the wagon. We're organizing cleanup of the mine tailings. Could use someone with knowledge of the land. Would you consider advising the effort? Samuel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request. His gaze swept over the townspeople, many of whom showed signs of the illness that had claimed his family. Finally, he gave a single nod. I'll come by tomorrow. See what you're planning. Without further comment, he turned his wagon and departed, leaving the water barrels behind. Mayor Collins approached Elizabeth, his expression a mixture of shock and hope. How did you manage that? Elizabeth smiled slightly. I didn't. I think Catherine did. The mayor looked confused, but Elizabeth didn't elaborate. Instead, she organized the distribution of the spring water, starting with households containing children and the elderly. True to his word, Samuel returned the next day. He arrived as Elizabeth was explaining her theories about the mine contamination to a group of townspeople. He stood at the back, listening silently until she finished. When the crowd dispersed, he approached with a map tucked under his arm. The tailings should be moved here, he said without preamble, pointing to a marked location. Natural basin, away from water sources. Elizabeth examined the map with interest. This is very helpful. Would you be willing to guide the first team? Samuel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. On one condition. I want to see your research. All of it. I want to understand what happened to my family. Over the following days, a fragile partnership formed between Elizabeth and Samuel. He provided practical knowledge of the land and resources, while she shared her medical insights. Together, they created a plan to address both immediate needs and long-term prevention. Samuel remained reserved, but occasionally Elizabeth caught glimpses of the man he must have been before tragedy struck. Once, when they successfully rigged a filtration system for the town well, she even saw him smile briefly. It transformed his face, erasing years of bitterness. Not a cure, he cautioned when he caught her watching, but a start. The town began to heal. New cases decreased dramatically, and existing patients showed improvement with clean water and proper treatment. Elizabeth expanded her clinic, training Martha and 2 other women in basic nursing skills. Samuel brought weekly water deliveries, gradually increasing his interactions with townspeople beyond curt nods. Elizabeth noted his progress with quiet satisfaction, recognizing the therapy in his renewed purpose. One evening, as they reviewed maps in her office, Samuel paused. "My wife would have liked you, Doctor. Your determination." Elizabeth looked up in surprise. "I think I would have liked her too, from what you've told me." The moment might have deepened, but a frantic knocking interrupted them. A miner burst in, panic evident. "Doc, it started again. 3 new cases since morning. All the Lambert family. They were getting better last week." Elizabeth grabbed her bag, Samuel following without being asked. The Lambert home revealed a family in crisis. All 4 members burning with fever and struggling to breathe. "These symptoms are different," Elizabeth murmured as she examined them. "More acute." Samuel watched from the doorway, tension evident in his stance. "Like Catherine at the end," he said quietly. Elizabeth looked up sharply. "Are they using the spring water?" Mrs. Lambert nodded weakly. "Yes, Doctor. Started last week when we began feeling better." Elizabeth worked through the night to stabilize the family, sending Samuel for additional supplies. By morning, her concern had deepened. "This appears to be a secondary infection," she explained to Samuel as they walked back to her office. "Their lungs were damaged by the initial illness, making them vulnerable." Samuel's expression darkened. "So your treatments aren't working." Elizabeth sighed. "They're helping the primary condition. But we now face a new challenge." Samuel stopped walking. "More will die then." "Nothing has changed." Elizabeth grabbed his arm. "Everything has changed, Samuel. We understand the problem better. We have clean water. We have hope." But Samuel withdrew, the brief openness gone from his expression. He delivered supplies as promised but declined to enter homes or participate in treatment discussions. A week later, he failed to appear for a scheduled meeting about expanding the water system. Elizabeth rode to his ranch, concern mingling with frustration. She found him in the spring house, a bottle of whiskey half empty beside him. "So the doctor makes house calls," he remarked bitterly. "Come to report more failures?" Elizabeth sat beside him, ignoring the barb. "The Lamberts are improving. The new treatment protocol is working." Samuel laughed harshly. "Until the next illness strikes. It's a losing battle, Elizabeth." Elizabeth studied him, the regression evident in his hunched shoulders and haunted eyes. "The loss is still fresh for you, isn't it? Even after all this time." Samuel didn't look at her. "Every time I ride into town, I see them. Catherine buying fabric for dresses. James running with his friends. Little Sarah collecting wildflowers." Elizabeth placed her hand over his, a gesture both professional and personal. "They're not coming back, Samuel. But others might live because of what you're doing now." Samuel withdrew his hand. "Until they don't. Like the Lamberts almost didn't. What's the point?" Elizabeth stood, unexpected anger flaring. "The point is that you're still here. You survived. Maybe it's time to ask yourself why." The confrontation hung between them, neither willing to retreat. Finally, Samuel reached for the whiskey again. "Go back to town, Doctor. I'm finished playing the hero." Elizabeth walked to the door, then turned back. "If that's true, then Catherine was wrong about you. She believed you were strong enough to carry on, to find meaning again." Samuel hurled the bottle against the wall, glass shattering. "What do you know about meaning? About loss? You couldn't save your fiancé. How dare you judge me?" Elizabeth absorbed the verbal blow without flinching. "I know that helping others is the only thing that made my loss bearable. The only thing that still does." Elizabeth left him there, amid broken glass and bitter memories. She returned to town and threw herself into her work, expanding treatment facilities and training more assistants. Days passed without word from Samuel. The town continued its slow recovery, but Elizabeth found little satisfaction in the progress. Her thoughts continually returned to the ranch and the man whose pain mirrored her own in so many ways. 2 weeks after their confrontation, Martha brought news that chilled Elizabeth's blood. The Blackwood ranch hand brought word. Samuel's fallen ill again, refusing to leave his bed or eat. Elizabeth gathered her supplies immediately. "How long?" Martha shook her head. 3 days at least. He wouldn't let Reed send for you until today. Elizabeth found Samuel in a state of severe dehydration and exhaustion, though his fever was surprisingly low. She worked efficiently, saying little as she administered fluids and medicine. Samuel watched her through half-closed eyes. Come to say I told you so? Elizabeth met his gaze coolly. I don't waste breath on unnecessary words, Mr. Blackwood. Drink this. All of it. Samuel complied weakly. This isn't the same illness, he murmured after a while. Elizabeth completed her examination before responding. No. This is what happens when a man decides to stop living. Your body is simply following your mind's lead. Samuel turned away from her blunt assessment. Maybe that's for the best. Elizabeth pulled a chair to his bedside, her expression softening slightly. I thought the same once. After David died, I contemplated following him. Samuel looked back at her, surprise evident despite his weakness. What stopped you? Elizabeth's smile was sad. A child with pneumonia. Her mother brought her to the hospital where I was completing my training. I was the only one available. In saving her, I found reason to continue. One patient at a time. One day at a time. Samuel closed his eyes. I'm not you, Elizabeth. I don't have your strength. It was the first time he'd used her given name, the intimacy of it hanging in the air between them. Elizabeth prepared a broth, helping him sit up to drink it. You have more strength than you know, Samuel. I've seen it. The town has seen it. Samuel accepted the broth without argument. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I dream of them. Every night. Elizabeth nodded. I still dream of David sometimes. Samuel's question came hesitantly. Does it ever stop hurting? Elizabeth considered the question carefully. The pain changes, becomes part of you rather than consuming you, but only if you choose to keep living. For 3 days, Elizabeth stayed at the ranch, dividing her time between Samuel and urgent cases in town. Samuel's physical health improved steadily, though his emotional state remained fragile. On the 4th morning, Elizabeth found him dressed and standing on the porch, gazing toward town. You don't need to stay anymore, doctor. I can manage now. Elizabeth studied him carefully. Can you? Samuel met her gaze directly for the first time in weeks. Yes. I've been thinking about what you said. About choices. Elizabeth nodded, relieved but cautious. And what have you decided? Samuel turned back to the view. That Catherine wouldn't want her spring to stop flowing just because she's gone. Elizabeth returned to town with mixed emotions, uncertain if Samuel's apparent breakthrough would last. Her doubt was answered 2 days later when Samuel appeared at the clinic with a wagon of supplies. Lumber, tools, and medicines he'd ordered from the next county over. I thought we might expand the clinic, he explained simply. More patients are coming from outlying areas now. Elizabeth accepted his offering with a smile that conveyed her understanding. This gesture represented far more than practical assistance. It was Samuel's first step toward rejoining the living. As summer turned to fall, Cottonwood Springs showed signs of revival. The mine reopened with new safety measures. Homes were repaired, and a few new families arrived, drawn by reports of the town's recovery and its dedicated doctor. Samuel became a regular presence, overseeing water purification efforts and contributing his business acumen to rebuilding plans. The clinic expanded to a proper infirmary, with Samuel often working alongside Elizabeth. Their partnership deepened into friendship, their shared experiences creating a bond that needed little verbal expression. Winter brought new challenges. Early snowfall isolated outlying farms, and cold temperatures threatened those still recovering from respiratory ailments. Elizabeth organized teams to deliver supplies and check on vulnerable households. Samuel's ranch became a way station for these efforts, his home often filled with volunteers warming themselves before continuing their rounds. One snowy evening, as they sat before his fire after a long day of deliveries, Samuel regarded Elizabeth thoughtfully. You've brought life back to this place. Not just the town. This house. Elizabeth looked around at the room that no longer felt like a shrine to the dead. The photographs remained, but they were now joined by maps, medical texts, and signs of daily living. You did that yourself, Samuel. By choosing to live again. Samuel moved to sit beside her, hesitation in his movements. There's something I need to say, something I've realized. Elizabeth waited, sensing the importance of the moment. When Catherine and the children died, I thought my purpose died with them. The guilt was overwhelming. Elizabeth nodded. It always is for survivors. Samuel took her hand, the gesture no longer merely that of patient and doctor. Meeting you showed me that loss can lead to something new. Not a replacement, but a continuation. A new chapter. Elizabeth felt tears threatening, her professional detachment slipping. I felt the same after David. Like my future had been erased. Samuel's voice was gentle. And now? Elizabeth met his gaze steadily. Now I understand that honoring the dead means embracing life. In all its possibilities. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Samuel's hand tightened on hers. Stay, Elizabeth. Not just as the town's doctor. Stay here with me. Help me make this place live again. Elizabeth felt the weight of the request and all it represented. Their shared experiences, their parallel journeys through grief, their complementary strengths. The answer came with surprising ease. Yes, I'll stay. The town needs both of us now. Samuel's smile was full and genuine. The transformation from their first meeting complete. It's more than that. I need you. Elizabeth leaned forward, the distance between them closing. And I need you. Together, they would continue to heal Cottonwood Springs. Together, they would build something new from the ashes of loss. Before we close this chapter of our story, friends, we'd love to hear what you thought. Has a personal loss ever led you to find new purpose or meaning? Your stories strengthen our community and remind us that even in our darkest moments, hope remains. Until next time, remember that healing comes in many forms, and sometimes the most unexpected encounters bring the greatest renewal.